Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 24 says, "The hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute." You know, the Word of God, especially in the book of Proverbs, speaks a lot about the contrast between the man that is slothful and the man that is diligent. I believe the Christian man should be diligent. He should be a person of purpose. I believe God's blessings will be on that man. I think that's why that verse says, "The hand of the diligent shall rule." And that's because God is with that man that is diligent. He's diligent not only in his business, but at home and in his home life. And he's diligent in his ministry at church. And I believe you'll see that that man that is diligent in his work, his ministry will prosper, his business will prosper, and his home life will prosper. And the Word of God spells that out very clearly, like I say, throughout His Word. The last part of the verse says, "But the slothful shall be under tribute." You know, the Word of God in the book of Proverbs teaches a lot about the slothful man, and we know that means laziness. Chapter 19, verses 18 and 24 talk about laziness and what that brings about. Chapter 19 and verse 15 says that it brings about hunger. It also in chapter 20 and verse 4 says that it leads to poverty. And also in chapter 18 and verse 9 says that slothfulness produces waste. And also in chapter 22 and verse 13 it says that it causes fear. They said the slothful is afraid to go out because there may be a lion in the street. I believe the slothful man looks for reasons to not be productive. He looks for reasons and excuses. Really, there's not a reason for being slothful, but there are a lot of excuses for being slothful. He looks for a lot of excuses to excuse away why things aren't going right in his life and in his home and in his ministry. Most of the time, those things are caused because you're lazy. You bring those about onto yourself. I think the man of God needs to be diligent. We need to be diligent in what God has given us to do. We've been called, men, to lead in our homes, to lead at work, and to lead in our ministry. I believe that God would have us to be diligent. I think of David, and let's use him as an example. When he was diligent and he sought God's face and he was strong in his faith and in his daily life, he was very, very faithful in what God had called him to do. And God caused him to prosper, raised him up from a boy that was watching sheep into a king. But then David became slothful in the way that he lived his life. And we know at the time when the king should be out to war, where was David at? David was at home. He was up on the rooftop, taking it easy, walking around being lazy, not being diligent in what God had given him to do. God gave him a job of the kingdom, and he forsook that for laziness. And that brought about the downfall of David's kingdom. It produced the things that Proverbs teaches us that slothfulness will produce. And men, that will be what happens in our lives. If we're not diligent and faithful in what God has given us to do. Diligence and faithfulness brings about God's blessings, but slothfulness and laziness will bring about the downfall. We will be under tribute. We will be undercut. Diligence will bring about faithfulness in our Christian lives. God's blessings will be on the diligent man. But God will frown upon those that are slothful, and God's hand will not be with them. We will see failure in our lives when we become slothful. So let's be extra careful to be diligent in our daily lives.